The bells were already ringing when I first saw him standing across the riverbank. The wind carried white flower petals from the wedding decorations toward the water. Guests were sitting in rows behind me, whispering. Some were excited. Others were confused. But I kept smiling, the same calm smile I had practiced in front of the mirror the night before. Because today was not supposed to be about love. Today was about survival. I was supposed to marry Daniel, the man I had known for only 3 months. The man who had listened when I cried. The man who never asked about my past. But my past was standing across the river. His name was Amen. My first love. The man who once promised we would build a home together near the river where we first met as teenagers. 3 years ago, Armin left me without explanation. One morning he simply disappeared. No calls. No messages. Just silence that felt louder than any goodbye. And today, on my wedding day, he returned. The ceremony had just begun when Armin appeared in the distance. He was standing on the old wooden bridge, wearing the same black jacket I had bought him on his birthday. My heart didn't race. It froze. Guests hadn't noticed him yet. But I did. Daniel was standing beside me, holding my hand. He whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded. But my fingers were cold. Then Armin shouted my name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just once. Soft enough to sound like a memory calling me back. People turned their heads. I didn't move. Armin started walking toward us on the bridge. Slowly. Like he was carrying something heavier than his body. Then he stopped. He shouted, "I never stopped loving you." The crowd gasped. Daniel tightened his grip on my hand but didn't speak. Then Armin said something that made everyone freeze. "She is still mine." I felt tears forming, but I kept smiling. Because I had already made my decision. 3 years ago, Armin had left because of money problems. His family had forced him to move abroad to work. He promised he would come back. But months passed. Then years. I later discovered he had started a new relationship overseas. I saw photos on social media. Happy photos. Smiling photos. I stopped waiting. That was when I met Daniel. Daniel was not exciting. He was not mysterious. But he was stable like quiet water. He said, "I won't disappear." And I believed him. On the bridge, Armin suddenly started running. Not toward me. Toward the river. People screamed when they realized what was happening. He climbed over the railing. "Stop!" someone shouted. But Armin looked at me one last time. "I came back for you," he said. Then he jumped. The splash echoed like thunder. Guests ran toward the river. Some were screaming. Some were crying. The wedding ceremony turned into chaos. But I did not move. Daniel looked at me carefully and asked, "Do you want to go after him?" I shook my head. "I can't keep drowning for someone who chose to leave me once," I said quietly. Rescue teams pulled Armin from the river 20 minutes later. He was alive. But unconscious. His mother arrived soon after, crying and shouting my name like I was responsible for his madness. But I still stood beside Daniel. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel handed me a letter. "I knew he would come," Daniel said calmly. "That's why I wanted you to read this before the ceremony ended." The letter was from Armin's sister. It said Armin never cheated. He left because he had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. He thought I would leave him if I knew. So he left first, pretending he had moved on. The photos I saw, fake happiness. He had been undergoing treatment alone. My hands started shaking. But I didn't cry. Because the letter also said something else. Armin had come back today not to take me away, but to ask if I could forgive him. I looked at Daniel. He smiled sadly. "You don't have to choose me," he said. "I just want you to choose peace." That was when I realized something shocking. Daniel had known about Armin the entire time. He had even paid for Armin's treatment secretly through a hospital contact. "Why?" I asked. He replied, "Because love is not about winning someone. It's about making sure they survive their pain." I walked to the hospital that evening. Armin woke up when I sat beside his bed. We didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't expect you to come." I told him, "I didn't come back for love. I came back for closure." He cried quietly. I told him I was getting married, to someone who knew how to stay, not just someone who knew how to leave. He nodded. That was the last time I saw him. I returned to the wedding hall that night. The guests had left. The decorations were still moving slightly in the wind. Daniel was waiting. I took his hand. "Let's finish the wedding," I said. He smiled. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel like I was living inside someone else's memory. I felt like I was finally starting my own story. But the real twist came months later. Because one night, while going through old photos, I found something shocking. In the background of one of Armin's old hospital records was a date. The same date Daniel first met me. And the hospital records showed Daniel had been Armin's doctor before we ever met. Which meant Daniel had planned everything from the beginning. But that is a story for another documentary. And sometimes, the scariest truth is not betrayal. It is discovering that everyone was protecting someone, even when they were hiding their real intentions. The bells were already ringing on my wedding day. I first saw him standing across the river weather. The wind carried white flower petals from the wedding decorations. I was supposed to marry Daniel today. Guests were sitting in rows behind everyone called gentle, successful, some were excited, and emotionally calm. Others were confused. But I knew something about Daniel I kept smiling. Nobody else the same did. Calm smile and I was still smiling in front of the mirror. This was the happiest day of my life. Because today was not supposed to be about hiding something. Today was about survival. Came when Armin appeared on the bridge to marry Daniel. But this time, the man I had known for only 3 months. He was holding flowers. The man who had listened when I cried. I had placed on my mother's grave 2 weeks ago. About my past. I felt my chest tighten. But my past was standing across the river. I visited my mother's grave. Not even Daniel. The man who once promised we would build a home together near the river was pale, where we first met, almost ghost-like under the sunlight. 3 years ago, he didn't shout my name without explanation. He just one morning he simply like he disappeared. Already knew I was watching him. 3 years ago, Armin didn't just leave because felt louder than any goodbye. He left because of death. And today, on my wedding day, he returned. I later discovered that Armin had borrowed money from dangerous men appeared in the distance. Who didn't like waiting. He was standing on the old wooden bridge. If he stayed with me, the same black jacket, I would have been dragged into that birthday. So my heart didn't disappear. It froze. But today was not supposed to be a reunion yet. Today was revenge. Daniel was when the ceremony began. Daniel kept smiling at me. He whispered, but I noticed something strange. I nodded. His phone kept vibrating. My fingers were cold. He kept ignoring it. Armin shouted my name. Then I saw a message pop up when he accidentally placed the phone on the table. Just once. She is going to remember soft enough to sound like a memory calling me back. People turned their heads. I had already suspected Daniel was connected to my past toward us on the bridge. Because Daniel wasn't just someone I met. He was carrying something heavier than his body. He had moved into my neighborhood 6 months after Armin disappeared. He shouted, and he knew things about Armin that I never told him. The crowd gasped. Too many coincidences. Daniel tightened his grip on my hand, shouted from the bridge. Then Armin said something that made everyone freeze. Everyone turned. She is still mine. I came back to tell the truth. I felt tears forming. The crowd got silent. Because I had already made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, Armin had left because of money problems. Daniel's smile his family had forced him to move abroad to work. Pulled out his phone. He promised he would come back. Playing a recording. But months passed. My heart pounded when I heard my own voice. I later discovered he had started a new relationship overseas. It was me speaking to someone else on social media. Crying. Happy photos. Then the recording showed I had been talking to Armin secretly for months after he left. That was when I met Daniel. I had lied to Daniel. Daniel was not because exciting. I was afraid of losing emotional comfort while still waiting for Armin to return. Quiet water. But the real shock was what came next. I won't disappear. The recording suddenly changed. On the bridge, I heard Daniel's voice. Suddenly started running. Cold. Not toward me. Controlled. Toward the river. I will make sure people never screamed when they realized what was happening. The recording was from 2 years ago. Guests started whispering. Someone shouted. My relatives looked at me one last time. But I still stood there. I came back for you, because I had one question. Then he jumped. Why are you doing this today? Like thunder. I shouted at Armin toward the river. He looked at me. Some were screaming and said the words I never expected. The wedding ceremony turned into chaos. The crowd froze again. He explained he had only weeks left. The illness he once lied about? I shook my head. It was real. I can't keep drowning for someone who chose to leave me once. Returned not to marry me. Rescue teams to make sure I knew the truth about 20 minutes before he died. He was alive. Then the darkest twist happened. Unconscious. Sirens his mother arrived soon after near the river, crying police and shouting my name like I was responsible and they arrested for his madness. Daniel. But I still stood emotional manipulation. Then something unexpected happened. 3 years ago, Daniel, one of Armin's creditors, had been found dead. I knew he would come, and evidence showed Daniel had been working with them. That's why I wanted you to read this. Daniel had been secretly collecting information about Armin's debt situation. The letter was from Armin's sister. Because Daniel wasn't protecting me. Never cheated. He was waiting for Armin because he had been diagnosed so I would have nowhere else to go. He thought I would leave him if I knew. So he left first. Daniel looked at me while being taken away. The photos I saw. He didn't look angry. Fake happiness. He looked disappointed. He had been undergoing treatment alone. You were supposed to choose me, he said softly. My hands started shaking. But I finally realized something terrifying. Because the letter had never been choosing else. Armin had come back today not to take me away. That night, I went to the hospital where Armin was staying. I looked at Daniel. He was weaker now. He smiled sadly when he saw me. You don't have to choose me, he said. I just want you to choose the final secret. That was when I realized Daniel's something shocking all along. Daniel had known expose them earlier because he wanted me to see Daniel's true nature for Armin's treatment secretly. Love shouldn't feel like prison, Armin said. Why? Then he added something darker. He replied, because if I had stayed alive, about winning I would have tried to take you back from him. It's about making sure they survive their pain. Armin died. I walked to the hospital that evening. But Armin woke up in the hospital, I sat beside his holding bed. My hand. We didn't speak for a long time. I received a package in the mail. I didn't expect you to was come. A video recording I told from him Armin. I didn't come back for love. The video was recorded the night before his death. Closure. In the video, he cried quietly. He said something chilling. I told him I was getting married. If you are watching this, to someone who knew how to stay, I was right about not Daniel. Just someone who knew how to leave. Then the screen went black nodded for 5 seconds. That was the last time and Daniel's voice was heard in the background to the wedding hall that night, whispering. The guests had left. You will never escape. The decorations were still moving slightly in the wind. Later discovered something was even darker. I took his hand. Had been following me long before Armin disappeared. He had chosen me as a target, and for the first time I was emotionally vulnerable. I didn't feel like I was living inside someone else's memory. He wasn't looking for love. I felt like I was finally starting my own story. But today, the real twist I still wear my wedding ring. Because not because I stayed with Daniel, photos, not because I loved Armin more. In the background of one of Armin's old hospital records was a date. Sometimes the people who smiled the most at your happiness met me. Are the hospital planning how to show Daniel had been Armin's doctor before the river doesn't just swallow secrets. It waits for them to come everything back from the beginning. But that is a story for another documentary. And sometimes, the scariest truth is not betrayal. It is discovering that everyone was protecting someone, even when they were hiding their real intentions. I thought the story ended with death. But I was wrong. Because death is often just the beginning of the real horror. After Armin's funeral, life did not return to normal. People expected me to cry more. To break down. To become a widow of memories. But I kept working. Kept smiling. Kept living with Daniel, even after his arrest had turned our life into a media nightmare. Except, Daniel was released. Not because he was innocent, but because the witnesses disappeared. One by one. The first witness was Armin's sister. She was supposed to testify about Daniel's financial crimes and his connection to Armin's debt collectors. But one morning, she was found unconscious in her apartment. The official report said overdose. But I knew her. She hated medicine. She never even took painkillers. When I visited her in the hospital, she squeezed my hand. "Leave this city," she whispered. "You are still part of his game." I asked, "Whose game?" She started crying. But before she could answer, Daniel arrived. He smiled politely at me, then told me to go home and rest. I didn't argue, because I had started to notice something terrifying. Daniel was never emotionally aggressive. He was psychologically patient. The most dangerous type of person. 2 weeks later, Armin's old friend contacted me secretly. He told me something worse than I expected. Armin had not only been in debt. He had been working as an informant for financial crime investigators. He was gathering evidence against the same criminal network that was hunting him. And Daniel was connected to that network. But there was something worse. Armin had suspected Daniel from the beginning. He had left me not just because of debt or illness, but because he believed loving me would put me directly in danger. I think Daniel is obsessed with you, Armin's friend told me. He was watching you even before Armin disappeared. That night, I couldn't sleep. I started checking old photos. That was when I found it. In one of my university pictures, taken 4 years ago, Daniel was standing in the background. Just standing there. Looking directly at the camera. Not smiling. Just watching. The next day, I confronted Daniel. He didn't deny it. Instead, he made tea for us. Like we were discussing normal life problems. Then he told me the truth. I saw you when you were still grieving after your mother's death, he said. I thought you were beautiful when you were broken. My stomach turned cold. He continued. I didn't want to destroy you. I wanted to be the one who rebuilt you. That was when I realized something horrifying. Daniel didn't see love as partnership. He saw love as construction. Like he was building a human being from emotional ruins. Then he showed me something. A folder on his laptop. It contained surveillance photos of me from the past 5 years. Not just public photos. Private photos. Taken from inside my apartment building. Taken from outside my office. Taken from the street where I bought groceries. My heart was racing. You were never randomly placed in my life, I said. No, he replied calmly. I engineered the meeting. He explained everything. He had been studying my psychological profile for years. My vulnerability after my mother's death. My fear of abandonment. My tendency to stay with emotionally stable partners even if I didn't feel passionate love. He chose to be emotionally safe. Not emotionally genuine. But the real horror began that night. Because someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, I saw Armin. Alive. Standing there like a ghost that refused to stay dead. I almost fainted. I didn't die, he said quietly. I faked my death. I couldn't speak. He explained that he had learned about Daniel's network controlling local authorities. If he stayed alive, Daniel would keep hunting him. So he disappeared. He switched identities. He hid in a small coastal town. But he came back because he knew I was in danger. You are still being watched, Armin said. Then he added something terrifying. Daniel isn't just obsessed with you. He wants to replace you. I thought he was exaggerating. Until I found the locked room in Daniel's house. I had never been allowed to enter that room. That night, Daniel left for work early. I found the key hidden under his office desk. Inside the room was a nightmare. There were dresses. Exactly my size. Photos of me sleeping. Hair samples labeled with dates. Voice recordings of me talking to friends. And in the center of the room was a mannequin. Wearing my wedding dress. With a mask painted to look like my face. I almost vomited. Then I noticed something else. There were medical files on the table. Files about psychological conditioning. Daniel had been studying behavioral control techniques. Not just to love me, but to gradually make me emotionally dependent on him. Slowly, quietly, until I would believe I chose him willingly. I ran out of the house. Armin was waiting outside. He took my hand and said, "You have to leave tonight." But I hesitated, because I still felt something for Daniel. Not love. Fear mixed with emotional attachment. That is how psychological control works. It doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like safety. But I didn't leave that night. Because I wanted answers. I returned home. Daniel was already waiting. He wasn't angry. He was sad. "You went into the room," he said. I nodded. He sighed. Then he said the most terrifying sentence of my life. "You are not supposed to be afraid of me. You are supposed to feel like you cannot live without me." The next morning, police found Armin's car abandoned near the river again. But this time there was blood inside. Not enough to confirm death. But enough to make me panic. I called Armin's phone. No answer. Then I received a video message. It was from an unknown number. The video showed Armin tied to a chair. And Daniel was standing behind the camera. "Choose," Daniel's voice said. "Stay with me, or he dies." I went to the river bridge alone. Daniel was there. Armin was also there. This time, Armin was not jumping. He was already tied to the railing. The wind was stronger tonight. "I don't want to lose you," Daniel said softly. "You never had me," I replied. That was when Daniel smiled. Not angrily, but peacefully, like he had been waiting for that answer. Then he whispered something terrifying. "I know." Then he pushed Armin into the river. I screamed. But Armin had already told me his plan earlier. He had been wearing a hidden safety harness. He survived. Police arrived minutes later. Daniel didn't resist arrest. He just looked at me and said, "You will think about me when you are happy with someone else." Because emotional scars are how he wanted to stay inside my mind forever. Months later, I moved to another city. Changed my name. Changed my phone number. Started a new life. But sometimes, late at night, I receive unknown messages. Short messages. From unknown numbers. They always say the same thing. "You can run from me, but you will never forget who built you." And sometimes, I think I see Daniel in crowds. Just standing there. Watching. Smiling. Waiting patiently. Because the scariest kind of love is not the one that fights for you. It is the one that learns how to live inside your mind forever. I thought escaping was the end. But in reality, it was just the beginning of the real nightmare. Because some people don't chase you with footsteps. They chase you with memories. And Daniel was very good at memories. The new life that wasn't really new. I moved to another city after everything happened. New apartment. New job. New identity documents. I even cut my hair short because I felt like changing my appearance would help me feel free. For the first 2 months, life was quiet. Too quiet. I started thinking maybe everything was over. Then one morning, I found a package outside my apartment door. No sender name. Inside was a single photo. It was a picture of me sleeping. Taken from above. Like someone had been standing beside my bed. The back of the photo had one sentence written in black ink. "You look peaceful when you think you are safe." I burned the photo. But I couldn't burn the fear. The discovery of the third player. I started investigating Daniel's past. That was when I found something worse. Daniel had a brother. No one ever mentioned him. His name was Ethan. Ethan had died 5 years ago. Officially, suicide. Unofficially, police suspected murder but closed the case due to lack of evidence. Then I found Ethan's social media accounts. And I saw something horrifying. There were photos of me from years before I met Daniel. From places I had never told anyone about. That meant someone had been following me long before Armin disappeared. Not Daniel. Someone else. Someone inside Daniel's family. The truth about Daniel's obsession. I confronted Daniel after he unexpectedly showed up at my new apartment building lobby. I asked him directly, "Was I ever actually safe?" He didn't lie. He said, "No." Then he told me something shocking. He had been watching me since university. But he wasn't alone. His family was part of a private psychological research group. Not officially legal. More like an underground organization studying emotional dependency. They selected people who were emotionally vulnerable. Then placed perfect partners into their lives. People who would seem safe, stable, reliable. People like Daniel. I felt sick. "So, Armin?" I asked. Daniel looked down. "That was the experiment failure," he said. My blood turned cold. The experiment that went too far. According to Daniel, Armin was never supposed to come back. The plan was simple. Make me fall in love with Armin first. Create emotional dependency. Then remove Armin permanently. Replace him with someone emotionally safer. But Armin started investigating the organization. He was never just a lover. He was becoming a threat. That was why Armin was forced to leave. Not just for debt. Not just for illness. But because he had discovered their system. The night everything became darker. That night, I received a call from Armin. He was breathing heavily. "Don't trust Daniel's family," he said. "They are planning something bigger than you think." Then the call suddenly cut. I tried calling back. No answer. Instead, I received another message. From Daniel. It was a video. In the video, Armin was unconscious in a hospital bed, and a doctor was standing beside him. The doctor was Daniel's father, smiling at the camera, like he was proud of something. The wedding was not the beginning. I started digging deeper. What I discovered was terrifying. The wedding was not planned randomly. Daniel had chosen that exact location because the river had weak security surveillance coverage. Emergency response times were slow, and the bridge had psychological symbolism. People are more likely to make emotional decisions near water due to subconscious childhood memory patterns. Yes. They were studying psychology like military strategy. The final confrontation. I went to Daniel's house. I found him sitting alone in the living room, waiting for me. "I knew you would come back," he said calmly. "Why?" I asked. "Because you don't want to be alone," he replied. Then he said something terrifying. "You don't actually love freedom. You love the feeling of being chosen." I hated how right he was, but I kept walking toward him. Then I noticed something on the table. A contract, with my signature on it. But I had never signed it. It was forged. The contract stated that I had agreed to participate in emotional research trials in exchange for financial security after my mother's death. That was when I realized something worse. They had been financially controlling my life without me knowing. My bank accounts had been monitored. My job placements had been influenced. My apartment choices had been subtly suggested through targeted advertisements and social engineering. My life was never random. It was designed. The final twist, the truth about me. Then Daniel smiled, and told me the most horrifying truth of all. "You are not the victim of this story. You are the one they were studying." My brain froze. He explained. My psychological profile was extremely rare. People like me tend to stay emotionally loyal even under manipulation. That made me valuable data. Not just to Daniel, but to the entire organization. Then he said the final words that still haunt me. "You were never supposed to fall in love with Armin. You were supposed to choose me after he disappeared. But Armin had ruined the experiment by coming back. And now they had to decide whether I should disappear too." The final escape. That night, police arrived at Daniel's house. Armin had survived. He had given investigators evidence before disappearing again. The organization was exposed. Daniel's family was arrested. But Daniel himself disappeared. No trace. No body. No record. The last message. 6 months later, I received one last message. No number. Just text. It said, "You won. But you will never feel safe in love again." And sometimes, when I walk near rivers, I still feel like someone is watching me. Not chasing me. Just waiting. Patiently. Like they know that fear never really leaves. It just learns how to hide inside your happiness.